Hello everyone, welcome to this video tutorial on getting started with Syncfusion DataGrid for Xamarin.Forms. This tutorial will help you understand how easy it is to render a collection of data in the table format using DataGrid component with all the required and advanced features. In this tutorial, I'll be using Visual Studio 2017 with Xamarin already installed in it. I will show you how to create a demo application in Xamarin.Forms Android, iOS and UWP. To start with, let's open Visual Studio. Then create a new project. Choose the cross-platform and then mobile app Xamarin.Forms and name this application to be DataGrid Getting Started and then click OK. Now you'll be prompted to choosing platforms and code sharing strategies. For this project, I'll keep all the platforms selected and use the .NET Standard code sharing strategy. And I'll also choose the blank app, which is already chosen as default. Click OK and wait for the Visual Studio to set up the project. When that's happening, let's go through the features of the Syncfusion DataGrid component. DataGrid control is a high-performance grid component that helps display and manipulate large amounts of data in a tabular format. Its rich feature sets includes functionalities like data binding, sorting, grouping, editing, filtering, swiping, dragging, resizing, loading more items, pull to refresh, and exporting the data to excellent PDF formats. Now you can see from this data grid that you can sort the columns. You can sort by ascending, descending, and back to the original order. You can sort multiple columns. You can clear the sorting, and you could control the scrolling mode. You could see that there is an edge effect. You could see that horizontal scrolling is disabled in this application. You can drag and drop a column. You can resize a column as well. You can drag and drop a row based on it. You can select rows and you can also edit them. You can edit and commit the changes on it. Okay, now the project is ready. The first thing we have to do is add the required assemblies for the DataGrid control from the NuGet package manager. You can see that we have 4 different projects in the solution. One for Android, iOS, UWP, and also one for code sharing project. Now right click on the solution, choose Manage NuGet Packages for the solution, and in the next screen choose Browse tab and search for Syncfusion Xamarin DataGrid. Now select the SF DataGrid package for the Xamarin.Forms and choose the projects to be installed on. In this case, it is all the projects. And then click Install. Make sure you read and accept all the license agreements and continue installing. So now the projects are ready. I'll start with Android as the startup project. Let's begin by just running the Android project to see what we are starting with. Here we have the default application running, showing Welcome to Xamarin.Forms. Now we are ready to add the Syncfusion DataGrid to the project. I'll start by opening the main page.xaml file from the DataGrid Getting Started project. To add DataGrid to the page, you need to add the class reference to the DataGrid to the XAML file. At the top, add XML_ns::Syncfusion . and choose the namespace Syncfusion DataGrid. Now I will add the tag for the Syncfusion DataGrid to the page. I'll do this by referencing the namespace we just created. As we know that DataGrid as a data bound control, we need a collection of data to be bound to the data grid. In a real world scenario, this data can be rendered from services, REST API, or as JSON data or from a database. In this demonstration, I'm going to create a local collection of data which holds the information of some random orders of customers. So I'm basically going to bind the collection of orders info to the data grid to render in the table format. For that, first let me create a class called orders info.
Right click the DataGrid getting started project and choose add, and then class and name it as order info.
I inherit this class from iNotify property chain since my properties in this class needs notifications. This class has 5 properties such as order ID, customer name, ship city, and ship country. So first let me declare the required variables and then create the properties. I'll first implement this interfaces.
Fine, I'm declaring the required variables, and then let me create the properties for them. First, I'm creating the property order ID and write the property changes notification.
Similarly, we need to create the other properties as well. Fine, we have created all the required properties. Now I'm going to create a constructor to get the values for these properties so that I can pass on the values from my view model to be assigned to these properties when populating the data. Public order info string city and my country informations. Now I'm going to simply assign these to the properties. The customer ID information to the customer ID property. a name to the customer name property, and similarly the city and the country as well. So fine, so we have created the required model class. Now we're going to create a view model which generates some random orders information and stores it in an observable collection, which we are going to name it as orders info. Create a file class called view model, and this view model is simple, which is going to have a property of type observable collection, and name it as orders info. And in the constructor we are going to instantiate this orders info, and I'm going to generate some random orders information. I've already taken some orders information, so which I'm using it here for this demo. So that's it. So we have created our view model information. We have populated the data to bind it to the data grid, and we can now start configuring the data grid in the main page XAML. First, I will set the binding context of my page to be the view model so that the data can be rendered in the data grid. Fine. Then I will add the name to the data grid in the XAML as data grid. Now we can reference the data grid we just named and use these properties and methods to customize it in the code behind for the main page.xaml file. The data grid control is completely MVVM compatible. So in this video we will focus on how to render the data grid completely from the XAML. However, you can refer our documentation of the data grid control to see how this can be done using the code behind as well. Now we need to provide the source for the data grid to render the data. We can do this by setting binding to the item source property of the data grid. Hence I'm binding the orders info property which I defined in the view model. I'm also setting the default column width property to be 100, just to make sure that my grid has enough space to scroll horizontally. And that's it. Now let's build and deploy this project again in our Android device. Now you can see that the data grid is loaded with the data that we bound. Now you can scroll the data grid both the ways, horizontally and vertically. You can see that by default data grid is having bouncing, which could be controlled through API settings. Now let's configure some features in the data grid control and see how simple it is to use the data grid control. I can enable the sorting by using the API allow sorting. You can customize the bouncing effect of the data grid using the vertical overscroll move. You can also enable tri-state sorting, which I showed earlier, to bring back to the original state of the data. You can enable sorting for multiple columns. You can customize the column sizing using the column sizer property. Here I am setting this to star to fit in all the columns in the view to cut down the horizontal scrolling in my application. You can enable row and column dragging features using the allow dragging column and allow dragging row properties. You can enable selection by setting the selection mode property. There are also options to enable key navigation for UWP platform, and navigation mode is there to control navigation between rows and cells. And there are a lot more other features in the data grid which can be enabled using the APIs available here. which can be also seen from our documentation as well. Further, you can group by one or more columns in the data grid by simply adding the groups to the group columns description collection. For this, all you need to do is now I'm grouping this using the ship country call. The data grid also allows you to manually generate the columns by using the property auto generate columns. The default value of this is true. You can set this as false and manually generate the columns. You can also do the both. Here I'm just going to, using the columns property, I'm just going to define one column and which is order ID, and customize its header text as order space IG, and I'm going to make this header font attribute to be italic. Now let's rerun the same project again to see how some of the features of the data grid works. You could now see that the data will be grouped by ship country column and it can be sorted. So you could see that the header text here is order space ID and it is italic. By default, ship country is group. You can drag and drop a column now. You can drag and drop a row as well. You can select rows. Now let's deploy the same project on the iOS. To do this, I'll set the iOS project as the startup project. Since I'm using a Windows machine, I previously configured my Visual Studio to connect to a Mac on my network. This is required to deploy in iOS. Additionally, Xamarin does not render the assemblies by default in the Xamarin.Forms iOS project. In order to solve this, you must manually create an instance of the SF DataGrid renderer in the finished launching override method of the AppDelegate class in the iOS project. To do this, I need to expand the iOS project, open the appdelegate.cs file, and inside the finished launching method, create an instance for SF DataGrid renderer. The exact instructions and code you need to insert here can also be found in our documentation. You can also just copy and paste that from our documentation on the data grid. So I'm typing in here syncfusion.sfdatagrid.ios.sfdatagridrender.inet. Now I'll choose the iPhone simulator and click run. Since I'm using an iPhone X simulator, you can see that the path of the controller is actually clipped at the top. We can fix this by using this useSafeArea property. In the mainpage.xaml file, we need to add a namespace to be able to use the iOS specific code. At the top, type XML-NS iOS equals iOS specific. Now we can use the new iOS namespace we referenced to access the useSafeArea property and set it to true. Page.useSafeArea to true. Now you can run this iOS simulator again to see the changes. This time you can see that the app is correctly rendered at the top in the iPhone X simulator without any clipping, so everything works as expected. You can sort one or more column. You can drag and drop rows. So that's as simple as it is. Now let's run the project in the UWP to make sure that the Xamarin app is fully cross-platform capable. I'll set the UWP project as the startup project and deploy it in my local machine. Alright, once again we see that we have the exact same experience in the layout in the UWP project as well as we did in Android and iOS. Same feature sets and everything works as expected as it should in a Xamarin.Forms application. So we have 3 different projects from one single shared code, and that was it. So to recap, in this video we showed you how to start a new Xamarin.Forms project and add the Syncfusion DataGrid to it and render the bound data in a table format. We also tested the features of the DataGrid in Android, iOS and UWP platforms. We hope you found this video very helpful. Thank you.